Kyle Dubas is not interested in making serious changes to the Pittsburgh Penguins right now. And on today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast, Pat and I are going to go over what we took away from Dubas' press conference, plus get you all set for Penguins Coyotes on Tuesday night.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on Twitter at @SinForWet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at @LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. So, Kyle Dubas spoke to the media on Monday for the first time in quite a while. And the biggest thing I took away from that press conference is, man, is he patient, and probably more patient than Ron Hextall was. And it's funny, Ron Hextall might have been one of the most patient people I've ever seen be a GM. I think Dubas takes the cake on that one with how the Penguins have struggled this year. And let's put this out there. Obviously, Dubas is upset with how this season has gone. I think everyone in the Penguins organization is really upset with how this season has gone, and especially the fans are upset, as you all have a right to be, because there are higher expectations heading into the season for the Penguins. That said, Dubas right now is not interested in making a change to the coaching staff, whether that's Mike Sullivan or the assistants, and people can say what they want. I've for sure said my speech on Tar Reardon and why he should not have a job right now. You've kind of said the same thing, Pat. Dubas feels differently. I mean, we have to, I guess, understand that at least a little bit right now. Again, I may disagree with it, but that's how he sees it. And in terms of other changes for the team, he's giving it sounds like until the All-Star break, which is still a little bit of a ways away. My only worry is that it might be a bit too late at that point if the Penguins continue to struggle. But he's willing to give this team as much time as it needs to get right before potentially thinking about, okay, making a coaching change, whether it's an assistant or Mike Sullivan, making some roster changes and all that stuff. That's my biggest takeaway from that press conference. And regarding Mike Sullivan, I know I said on my Monday show that I wouldn't be surprised if he got fired, but I've also been saying as well on the other side, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't, just because of all that money FSG owes him, how his contract extension hasn't kicked in yet. Pierre LeBrun on Tuesday tweeted a tweet and said that Sullivan's about to make $5.5 million on his next deal, which is he's going to be one of the highest paid coaches in the league. Again, I know FSG has all the money in the world. They could easily can him if they want to. And again, it wouldn't be surprising considering how they played this year. But on the other side of things, I'm also not surprised because it definitely seems like Dubas and FSG believe in Sullivan, and they also just don't want to maybe have to pay all that money right now.
Right. And it's regardless of how rich your ownership organization is, swallowing $15 million is not easy, because that's what they would have to do if they were to get rid of Sullivan this season. You would essentially be paying him $15 million not to coach.
More than that, actually, but close.
Well, yeah, it's over $15 million. But, nice payday if you can get it, to get paid that much money to not do anything. But here's I was thinking about this yesterday after Dubas's press conference, and if you have followed my work wherever it is, whether it was Penn's blog, whether it's KDKA, whether it's here on this podcast, whether it's just my random musings on Twitter, I really think a lot of sports fandom, and obviously I'm most familiar with the Pittsburgh market. This could be a thing across all sports fandoms. It probably is, but I'm just most familiar with Pittsburgh. Firing a coach is not the silver bullet people want it to be, because most of the time, and let's just go with the Penguins' history, and I've kind of talked about this already on this podcast. The times especially the times that we're going to stick only with the Crosby-Malkin era, that the Penguins have fired the coach, they have needed to fire the coach. And the coach that came in was the opposite of the coach they replaced. So you think about it. Michel Therrien was a very conservative, very defense-first kind of coach. And he had a team that was young, inexperienced, and needed to learn that. And once they did, they were now ineffective because they were itching to play offense again. They were itching to score goals, and the league was starting to trend toward scoring goals. So Dan Bilesma comes in and opens it up. And what do? They go win a Stanley Cup. Then Bilesma's system gets matched, it gets whatever, and he doesn't want to change it. Who do they go get? They go get Mike Johnston, who is, again, defense first, be responsible in your own end, don't play offense, don't attack, don't push the pace. And that was just a horrible fit. Then they go get Mike Sullivan, who plays an aggressive, up-tempo type of system that wins them 2 Stanley Cups, keeps them as one of the better teams in the NHL. And while I don't think this is Kyle Dubas's MO, if you were to fire Mike Sullivan, chances are you're probably going to go get somebody who's the opposite of him. And yeah, maybe this team does need to be a little bit less aggressive, needs to play a little bit differently. But at the same time, they're not an ineffective team. We have been talking about this for weeks now. It's dipped a little bit, but they're still a pretty good 5-on-5 team. They're a very good penalty killing team. Tristan Jarry is looking like he might put up some career numbers this year. The issue is the power play. And until they can, if they can solve, they don't even have to solve the power play. It just has to be not terrible. So everybody who wants to fire a coach and thinks it's going to result in sunshine, rainbows, and Stanley Cup championships, I've got news for you. This isn't totally a coaching issue. It's a coaching issue on the power play, to be sure. And I'm with everybody. Todd Reardon should probably go, or at the very least, they should bring somebody in whose either only job is power play or is like an offensive coordinator type deal. But listen, this isn't a coaching problem. I'm with Dubas. He should be preaching patience because this is the best coach this franchise has ever had. And there's not many better out there.
I will say, sometimes the grass isn't greener on the other side. They have, though, looked like at times they've quit on Mike Sullivan. But then you have the game against Florida where for at least 2 periods, they look like they're playing for him again. But then you have the 3rd period where it all went to crap. I just want to see the level of consistency that we've seen under Sullivan before this year. Because even last year, I don't think that they ever truly quit on Mike Sullivan. The team that I feel like he had was more on Ron Hextall than him. It was just unfortunate what happened at the end of the season. And, they probably should have still beaten the Chicago Blackhawks. They should have still beaten the Columbus Blue Jackets. I'm not disagreeing with that. But I do think overall with the roster construction for last year, that was more, I would say, on Hextall than Sullivan was. My other biggest thing when people, you want to fire the coach. And again, I understand the cries. I hear you. I've seen people say, what if you bring in a more defensive-minded coach, you can play like some sort of trap. I'm not personally interested in that. I don't think also the Penguins will ever play that kind of system for as long as they have star players.
It's not how this team is built. It's just, It's not, and I don't mean that in a historical sense. I mean that in a very literal sense.
Yeah.
You look at this team, their top 6 is built to score. Their top 2 defensive pairings are built to score.
They're not built for a 1-3-1 like a Guy Boucher type system. They're not built to probably play Barry Trotz hockey or anything like that, or 90s Devils hockey. Now, you can still adjust the system to play more defensively, and we've seen that from Mike Sullivan this year. Why the players have gone away from that when we've seen it worked, that's the biggest question, Pat. I don't understand, because we've seen it work against Vegas. We've seen it work against Colorado. We've even seen it work against Toronto. I can throw a couple other games in there. Washington, for example, earlier this year. We've seen it work, but for some reason, it's not working on a consistent basis. And I don't know if it's the players that don't want to play like this on any given night, but you've shown an ability to both score and defend in the same game, and you're not willing to do it. Is that a coach problem? Is that a player problem? That's what I'm trying to grasp right now, because we've seen him make adjustments and they've worked, but why haven't they adjusted, or why haven't they worked for most of their games?
You know what the answer is? And I think a lot of people aren't going to be satisfied with this answer. It's human nature.
Yeah.
This team thinks they're supposed to be better because they should be better. And when you struggle, and you hear coaches in all sports talk about this, when you struggle like the Penguins are struggling right now, a team that is pretty talented, has some really good pieces on it, and it's not working, you're going to try to do more. You're going to try to overcompensate. You're going to try to push past it by doing more than you should, rather than sticking to a system that works and seeing it out. And while I don't always agree with the flowery talk and we just got to keep pushing, we just got to keep doing what we're doing, we got to stick to the process kind of stuff. If the Penguins were to do that, and eventually a goal or two goes in on the power play, a coin flip game goes their way, all of a sudden this team starts feeling themselves. And what do you know? They're suddenly on a roll, because you look at their 5-game win streak earlier this year. That's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, right. No, I agree with you. And again, I'll keep saying it, and I know you'll keep saying it. If this team had an average power play, I don't even think we're talking about a lot of these issues right now with the coaching staff, because it would be pretty high up in the standings. For God's sake, the New York Islanders are second in the Metropolitan Division right now, and they've honestly been bad for a lot of this season. They've been talking about firing Lane Lambert on Long Island. So this is I think this is still going to be a hot talking point throughout the season if they continue to get middling results. At the end of the day, Kyle Dubas has made his bet with this head coach. He easily could have just walked away because he had no loyalty to him coming into Pittsburgh, but he said, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I believe in Mike Sullivan. I believe in the coaching staff, which, again, that's bold. I disagree with some of those, but we'll have to see how this goes the rest of the season. Overall, I don't expect at this time Sullivan to be fired this year. Now, if they miss the playoffs after this year, I do think Dubas is going to have a serious discussion about this, because I think missing the playoffs 2 years in a row with Sidney Crosby playing at this level, with Evgeny Malkin mostly playing pretty well, Chris Letang, even Erik Karlsson, that's not acceptable in this town.
Agreed.
And I think I would potentially be in that boat for sure if they miss playoffs, but we've still got a long season ahead. But coming up in the second segment, Pat and I are going to do a full preview for Tuesday night's game against the Arizona Coyotes and how the Penguins can snap their 4-game losing streak. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about Sleeper, which is the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. You can do this by yourself. You can do this with your friends. Heck, you can even do this with your family, and you don't even have to do just daily fantasy hockey. You can do NFL, NBA, MLB, and college football all on Sleeper. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, Nathan McKinnon will record goals, assists. You can do plus minus. You can throw goalies in there like Connor Hellebuck, Igor Shesterkin, Jonathan Quick. With how he's playing right now, he's found the fountain of youth back to 2012 with his level with the New York Rangers. And to win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Penguins fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. Start paying attention and know your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host Patrick Damp. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. So, Penguins Coyotes tonight, as the Penguins try to snap their 4-game losing streak. And just a couple of lineup notes for everyone listening. Tristan Jarry was the first goalie off, so it looks like he's going to be your starter. That means Alex Nedeljkovic will probably go on Wednesday against the Montreal Canadiens, because this is the first half of the back-to-back. It also looks like P.O. Joseph is going to be making his return to the lineup. He is off the ice ahead of Ryan Shea, who's been in the lineup for quite some time. That comes courtesy of Matt Vensel of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So very good news, I would say, on both fronts there. Tristan Jarry has played mostly really well this year. And we'll just get to P.O. Joseph here, Pat. What are you expecting from him tonight? Because he's been out of the lineup for quite some time and dealing with a nagging injury. I think this is his big opportunity to take back this roster spot, because he's been obviously banged up, but even before that, he was being replaced by Shea, being replaced by Ludwig. If he's not able to take charge here and really win this spot, this could potentially be the end of his time here in Pittsburgh. He's got to string together some consistent play.
Yeah, as much as I said in the last segment, I still have a very serious belief in Mike Sullivan, and I think he's one of the best coaches, not just in Penguins history, but in the National Hockey League. I don't like the way he kind of short-leashed P.O. Joseph, just because of the the role he played and his age, I think you give him some time to work it out. And if the struggles continue, then yes, you pull him. But I think he went way too quick to bench him. So, but that you kind of already said what my take is going to be. He has to seize this job because let's not get it twisted. It wasn't like when he was in the lineup, he was doing well with some warts. He was bordering on bad, and that's not a good sign.
No.
So, he got a rehab stint in Wilkes-Barre to get some confidence back, get himself back in the groove of playing games rather than throwing him right back in the deep end of the NHL. And listen, the Penguins are very good. And I know a lot of people aren't going to want to hear this right now. Todd Reirden's very good at sheltering defensemen. And he's probably going to do that with P.O. Joseph tonight. He's probably going to put him in advantageous situations should the Penguins play the way they should. And he has to look good in those minutes. He's probably going to get 15, 20-ish around that minutes, maybe.
It might be a little less. He'll be with John Ludwig, I would say. Tonight.
Right.
Doesn't look like Rubido's ready to go just yet. And I'm intrigued about that kind of pairing with him and Ludwig because Ludwig brings that physical element to the pairing, can also move the puck. But Joseph, he brings more of an offensive identity to his game over Ludwig, I would say, while Ludwig is, I think, a little bit better defensively. It's kind of almost like a mini version of the Joseph Rubido pairing, but I think Ludwig, I mean, I've been optimistic about him throughout the year. I think he's been playing really well for the Penguins, but I'm intrigued about that pairing, to say the least. They haven't really had basically any time. So that's what I think you're going to see tonight, probably, 12, 14, 15 minutes, and then you'll be giving the rest of the game to the top two pairings.
Yeah, for some reason, my brain went forward and not backward. I meant like 15 to 12, not 15 to 20. But yeah, they're not going to get a ton of ice time, and they have to seize that opportunity. And I think this is actually a good mix of player here. Like, Ludwig has really played above expectation and looked good. And he does strike me as a get-right type of defensive defenseman where you put your struggling guy like a P.O. Joseph with him and it stabilizes his game. So I'm really curious to see that pairing.
Same here.
Away from any sort of X's and O's in stats, I want to get this out because it's so cool. I am so excited to see Logan Cooley tonight because if you know me, and most people who are listening to this do, you know how much Pittsburgh hockey means to me, and not just the Penguins. Like, I grew up playing hockey here. Like, I went to all the rinks. I played for the Badgers for 12 years, and I played college hockey in mostly Western Pennsylvania. So, like, seeing this sport grow from the Mario Lemieux days to the Sidney Crosby days to present, and now seeing a kid who was drafted 3rd overall, who didn't come from the wealthy suburbs of Pittsburgh, who didn't come from a bunch of money. He started playing hockey because of the Sidney Crosby's Little Penguins. He got the free stuff because his parents, I don't know if his parents couldn't afford it or if they just took advantage of it, but this isn't your traditional kid who grew up in a rich part of town, because West Mifflin's not the most wealthy part of Pittsburgh. And now he's in the NHL and he's a legitimate contributor, and he's coming home to play his first National Hockey League game in Pittsburgh. And as someone who grew up playing in the Pittsburgh Amateur Hockey League, I am just like bursting with pride about this.
And it would obviously be very Penguins to allow him to score a goal in his hometown tonight. So
they have to.
Betting person, definitely put that down on FanDuel wherever you bet. 3 goals, 15 points for Logan Cooley this year. I mean, there were people saying that he was going to win the Calder over Connor Bedard. I thought that was a little bit of a hot take at the time, but he'll be, I think, at least a finalist for this award, in my opinion. I mean, he should be really good this year for the Coyotes. I love watching this kid play. I think he's going to be a very good player for a very long time. His skating jumps out at you right away. The way he plays with the puck on his stick is absolutely gorgeous. I hope that he doesn't dust too many of the Penguins players too much tonight, but I feel like it could, just because of how skilled he is with the puck. But it's about time that the Coyotes have another really good and potential franchise player on their team, because that's what I think Logan Cooley can be for them. Because of how the Coyotes have been over the years, this has the makings of a potential franchise superstar, and that makes me happy for our Coyotes fans out there, because they haven't really had too many of those over the last several years.
Right. And to what I said yesterday when we did our kind of quick week ahead preview, this rebuild for the Coyotes is going really well because in Logan Cooley is evidence of that, not just because of how good he's playing. If you remember, prior to this season, prior to this past offseason, that is, Logan Cooley straight up said, I'm not going pro. I'm going back to the University of Minnesota. I am not going to go to the NHL yet. And whatever the Coyotes are doing, whatever Bill Armstrong is doing, is working because he decommitted and said, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm going to sign my entry-level deal, and I'm going to go play for the Coyotes. And while they're not a great team yet, they're competitive this year, and they're doing a lot of the right things. And it's really exciting to see that a local kid is going to be one of the cornerstones of this franchise going forward.
It makes me super happy as well. It's honestly kind of similar to, John Gibson with the Ducks when he was in his prime and how, he became a cornerstone for that franchise too. And actually, John Gibson has been playing a lot better this year. So I'll give kudos to him. It looks like he's found his game a bit more this season compared to last year. The Ducks haven't been that good this season, but they also did have a really good start. But I was just making the comparison because Gibson was a cornerstone for the Ducks toward the end of the days with Getzlaf and Perry. And, he's still there to this day, but it's great that the Coyotes have both Cooley and Clayton Keller. Keller, who has been electric this year. 9 goals, 25 points in 27 games. I think Keller is going to be a franchise player for them as well. Nick Schmaltz, I already talked about him on the Monday episode. 9 goals, 20 points. Nick Bukestad, old friend, has 17 points. Lawson Krause has 12 goals. Alexander Kerfoot, former Toronto Maple Leaf, he's been playing well. But the Coyotes, they're a bit banged up right now. They have some injuries, just like the Penguins. Barrett Hayton's on IR. Jack McBain's hurt. Travis Boyd is out, and also Sean Dursey is day-to-day. He might not be playing in this one. I really like that move that the Coyotes made over the offseason to get him from Los Angeles Kings. This is a Coyotes team that's lost 3 in a row. They lost to the Sabres on Monday night. I think the Penguins are getting them at a pretty good time. So even though they're a bit banged up as well, the Coyotes, after that 5-game winning streak, they're struggling. You want to keep those struggles going, and especially on a team that played on Monday night, and they're traveling to Pittsburgh from Buffalo for this game. And I know that's not that long of a road trip, but still, that's a team that played last night. You've been off for several days at this point. You have to take advantage and win this game and start getting your season back on track.
Agreed. And the funny thing is, it's hilarious because it's like these teams are the opposites of one another, right? Like Arizona is currently in a playoff position and they're hanging on to the second wild card in the West. But then you go to natural stat trick. They are 29th in shot attempts. So they're pretty low down the totem pole. Then you go to expected goals and they're 25th. It's like the opposite of the Penguins, who are top 10 in both and can't win. This is a team that's bottom tier in both of those, and yet is still pulling off wins. So it's kind of funny to compare the two franchises. But yeah, like Buffalo to Pittsburgh, not a long trip, but you played a surging team that's starting to look pretty good again in Buffalo. They're losing 3 straight. The Penguins have been off for 4 days. This is, you don't want to say must win, but it's a very much should win.
Honestly, I would say these next 2 games are should wins / almost must wins because you're playing 2 teams who, one is struggling, and then the Canadians, they're just flat out bad this year. So if you can get a couple wins in a row here heading into that game against Toronto over the weekend, that could be a big confidence boost for the Penguins. We'll have a full preview for the Canadians game on Wednesday, but first things first with the Coyotes. And then, you said for 29th in shot attempts for the Coyotes. I mean, this year, they're 26 in expected goals, 47%. They have a 51.8% actual goals rate. So their underlines aren't that good, but they do have a difference maker in net. Vanelka played on Monday, so the Penguins will probably be getting Connor Ingram tonight, who is 9th in the league in goals saved above expected, 9.4 overall, just a little bit above Tristan Jarry, and overall, 920 save percentage. This came out of absolutely nowhere. No one, and I mean no one, saw this coming from Connor Ingram. This is going to be, I will say, a very tough goalie for the Penguins to beat tonight.
Agreed. Don't have much to add. Didn't expect it out of him.
Nope. I definitely did not either. That's for sure. But hey, goaltending is voodoo, my friends. But that would do it for this second segment. Coming up to end the show, Penguins did not get some good injury news regarding Bryan Rust on Monday. Pat and I are going to get into what that means moving forward for the team. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll get your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host Patrick Damp. So as I teased heading into this final segment, Penguins really didn't get any good news on Bryan Rust. I mean, maybe it's better news considering what I heard about the injury, that it wasn't good, but he's still week to week, which that's so vague. I mean, this could mean 2 weeks, this could mean 3 weeks, this could mean a month. We don't know truly how long he's going to be out for, just because Mike Sullivan is always so vague with injuries. But how do you see the Penguins filling that hole for the foreseeable future? I mean, it looks like Rickard Rakell is getting closer. He was taking the morning skate with the team a little bit today. Hopefully he'll get some practices in soon, but with him out, that's a good chunk of their offense in the top six gone. And that means, I think, other players, especially in the bottom six, a lot of these AHL guys, these players are going to have to start really stepping up in a big way. It can't just be the Sidney Crosby and Jake Gensel and Evgeny Malkin and Riley Smith show every night.
Well, it's not good news that he's week to week. The one thing I will say that is good news is that that's the designation, because the fact that we heard for like 3 days he's being evaluated, we're going to know more, they're still looking at it, they're still like, that to me, like, that worried me very much, because you don't evaluate a guy multiple days in a row for an injury that's just, oh, he's a little bump, banged and bruised day to day.
Right.
Like, so hearing week to week and not like, hey, he's done for the season, or he needs some kind of surgery or procedure that's going to keep him out a couple months, that's a sigh of relief. But you're right. With Jesse Puljujarvi maybe waiting in the wings, depending on how this tryout goes, with some of the AHL guys still sitting here, and Rickard Rakell looking like he's close to coming back, these AHL guys got to make a move. They have to prove they belong at the NHL level. This isn't anymore. No longer are you here to patch a hole. Pretty soon, you're going to have to prove to Kyle Dubas, to Mike Sullivan in the coaching staff, that you belong as an NHL player, or you're hitting the turnpike and going back to Wilkes-Barre.
And I mean, hey, we saw at least a glimpse of more Valtteri Puustinen on Friday night against the Panthers. And speaking of that, he has 2 points in 2 NHL games right now. So he can make it 3 for 3 tonight against the Coyotes, and maybe even 4 for 4 against the Canadiens. But hey, let's not get too ahead of ourselves right now. But I thought, of the players that were called up from Wilkes-Barre for that game on Friday, he was by far the best. I thought he was good with the puck on his stick. He was responsible defensively. I didn't really see too much from Johnstone or Gruden, but I honestly didn't expect to see that much from them, considering also they don't have that much NHL experience, but I also don't think they're as good offensively as Puustinen is. I'm curious to see how Puustinen continues to get more of a chance with Malkin and Smith. Continue to show me something. In 2 games, he's been solid. Let's see if he can get that first goal tonight, or see if he can get another point, or just continue to be consistent at the NHL level. With Rust, though, man, with how he was finishing, it's such a tough loss, because he was looking like he was potentially going to have career best numbers this year if he were able to stay healthy. But it sucks that an injury is derailing that, especially at a time where the Penguins really need him, because they've been middling for a good while now. And now that they're going to be playing without him, just absolutely stinks. And again, that's just more pressure on the top guys to perform on a nightly basis. And hopefully the depth is able to step up in his absence. Hopefully they're also able to get some of these other guys back while he's gone, so this team can start looking more like the team that we thought it would look like at the start of the season. But it's definitely really tough overall, man.
I want to see Rickard Rakell get back. I think, and obviously
get back to that level we saw last year, please. Like, if he can even come close to that, it's going to fix a good chunk of the problems at 5-on-5, and it's only going to make Rust's return that much larger when he eventually comes back.
and this is obviously pure speculation. I don't have any sort of inside knowledge on this, but I think he was dealing with something before he went out because he just did not look like Rickard Rakell. And I think eventually the coaching staff and medical staff was like, just go get this fixed.
Right.
Because if you're in that age range that Rickard Rakell is and many NHLers are, you're dealing with something forever because you have played hard hockey and had hard miles on your body. You're not 100% healthy no matter what. So I think he was dealing with something. I think he's going to come back and be good, and then it's going to make the return of Rust even better. And I think this team is going to figure something out. Like, they're too good not to. The law of averages tell us eventually this is going to turn.
I just hope that we're both right about this because I know we're definitely more optimistic compared to a lot of the fan base out there. But, we've watched every game like you all have. We've seen the numbers. We've watched with our own eyes. We're hoping that this is going to turn a corner. Please, for the love of God, hey, how about a power play goal tonight? Let's start with that, too. Yeah. If they can somehow get that monkey off their backs, maybe that also gets them going in the right direction as well. Even if they get a bounce off someone's button in the net for the power play, a skate, whatever it takes, get that monkey off their backs, and then maybe the goals start really coming for that unit and honestly overall for this team. But I think that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back with a recap of this game on Wednesday, plus a preview of Wednesday night's game against the Montreal Canadiens. Remember, this is a back-to-back for the Penguins, so we'll have that episode for you all on Wednesday. We'll then recap the Canadiens game on Thursday this week, then get you all set for the Kyle Dubas Bowl in Toronto this weekend. But again, thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll talk with you all on Wednesday.